So not too long ago I did a bunch of videos about the IBU, and one of the things I kind of wanted to cover and never did was the radio and receiver part. Now when I did all the tests I was using my Fly Sky i6, but this is going to be for the battle tank project with the King Tiger and the JS2. So I picked up two of these. This is just the El Cheapo Hobby King T6 at $29.99 each, comes with the receiver. Usually the receiver is already bound to the radio, as it was in this case, but I was going to set this up on this board and test everything, so I thought I'd make a video, thought it might help somebody. Now I still haven't self-centered the left stick, but I do have the self-centering lever, so it's just a question of getting around to it. This has already got batteries in it and all that, so to do this the way I do it when I open a new radio, it's a pretty easy system really. I get a scrap of paper and I set it up for the two sticks, okay? And I've got my receiver. I got a 5 to 6 volt battery pack. This is 6 volts. I got it from Radio Shack back in the day, so that tells you how old that is. But I've got it hooked up to a servo plug so I can get power to the receiver. But however you get power to the receiver, this is the same thing you have to do if you need to bind your receiver to your radio. So this is kind of a must-have for RC. And then you just need a servo. Okay, so I'm going to flip on the radio. I'm going to plug in the receiver to where it says battery. Now, the center on these 3-prong pins, the center is always positive. So you've got negative on one side and signal on the other, and on these receivers signal is towards the inside. So I go into the battery channel. Now I'm just going to plug my servo. Same thing, the signal is on the inside on this. That's the yellow or gold or whatever you want to call it. So I plugged it into number 1. I heard the servo move. It's a persistent little booger, isn't it? So it shouldn't do anything on this stick, because that's not where I'm hoping it is. I'm hoping it's on this one right here, and it's not. Alright, so it's on the side to side on the right stick. Can you guys see that? Alright, it's side to side on the right stick. So that's channel 1. So I'm just going to mark that on here as channel 1, and then I'm going to move the plug to channel 2. Okay, now it's 1 and 2 are almost always together. It's almost always 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. This is a mode 2 radio with throttle on the left, by the way. You hardly ever see 1 and 3 and 2 and 4. Now this one should be on the up and down. It is. Okay, so that's going to be my throttle channel, and why that's important I'll get to in a second. So that's channel 2. Now 3 and 4 we're going to use obviously for turret control. So we're going to move up to channel 3. That should be on one of these two. There it is right there. It's on up and down on channel. So that's channel 3. So I'll mark that as channel 3. And by process of elimination, channel 4 should be side to side on this. And it is. So everything's good there. Now since this is a 6-channel radio, let's just keep going. I'm pretty sure I know what these are. That should be on this pot right here. That's channel 5. There we go. Now I can use that if I want to do a remote volume control. I'll just plug that into channel 5, and this end goes in where the volume control from the tank would plug in. Channel 6 should be the other pot. Then there's one more bonus on these radios. It is. Channel 6 is the other pot. Okay, so I'm going to unplug the receiver. I'll turn the radio off for a second. Now I've got the IBU all set to go. Okay, now if you go to the manual, and I really highly recommend that if you're working with the IBU that you print out this manual. I will email it to you in a PDF to anybody who wants one. All you got to do is ask. It's got so much information in here that you're going to need if you're using an IBU. Now first they give you the board layout. The upper one is the IBU Base and the lower one is the IBU Pro. one of the quick ways to tell is by the servo connections. On the base there's 4, on the Pro there's 6. Now this board is a base, so there's just 4. And on here it tells you RX channel 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it starts at this side and goes 1, 2, 3, and 4. The plug right next to it is for your smoke unit. Right, and if you go forward in the manual to page 14, it shows you what the channels are. Now they've got channel 1 is throttle, channel 2 is steering, channel 3 is elevation, and channel 4 is rotation. Now that's great, except that our channel 1 is side to side, and we want channel 1 to be the throttle. So that means we're going to go from channel 1 on the IBU to channel 2 on the receiver. And likewise with the other ones, then we'll go from channel 2 to channel 1. That's one thing that it depends on what kind of radio you're using. Now the IBU Base and Pro will both run on any 4-channel radio. But if you want the extra features of the Pro, then you have to have a 6-channel radio. But if you do have a Pro, I recommend that they set it up first as a 4-channel, and then once you get make sure everything's working as a 4-channel, then add your other 2 channels and play with the features that opens up to you. Now, one thing I should have mentioned at the beginning when I first powered up the receiver with the battery pack, my red LED was solid. If it had been flashing, that would mean that I need to bind it to the radio. But like I said, they're usually bound right out of the box. And for $29.99, I kind of like them. Another thing I forgot to mention is make sure your trims are set to 0. You want to be right. This still has the old-fashioned analog type trims, but if you're using an i6 or something like that, it should on the screen it should show you where your trims are at. So make sure they're set at 0. Now I've already got everything plugged in for the test. Now this is the same as it would be if the board was mounted into a tank. I've just got the speaker hooked up, I've got the on-off switch, I've got the smoker, and I've got the gearboxes. The only thing missing is the upper hull with the turret, and all of that with the IBU is through the 8-pin, and that's one of the things I like. That's really the only cable that comes down on an airsoft IBU is the 8-pin. If you've got the IR, if you're using IR, you will have more cables coming down. You'll have to have your receiver, your LED emitter, and your flash ring. Also, you might also have to plug in the one extra plug for the high intensity flash if that's what you're using. But anyway, now I'm just going to go ahead and do the standard startup process. Now first, I'm going to make sure that all of my dip switches are off. Let me get you a zoom on that part. Okay. Now this row of switches right here, those are your dip switches. 1 is at the top. They're clearly labeled 1 through 8. They should all be off unless you're using a LiPo battery, which we are. So for that, we're going to throw dip switch 4. Now that's also in the manual, what all the dip switches do. And here we go right here. It's on page 13 it starts. And it tells you what all those dip switches do, because you're going to need to set them to do, I know I'm zoomed. Yeah, let me back up just a second for you guys to get this in. Okay, on channel 13, that shows you what all the different dip switches do, and you're going to need them to set your weight class and whether it's a battle tank or a Bergpanzer or, you know, whatever's. So those dip switches are very important. And if you look on here, it says for battery type, LiPo or NIM. For LiPo, you want dip switch 4 to be on. So we're going to throw 4 right now to on for LiPo. Okay, next we're going to power up the board. Now when we power it up, we should get like 2 seconds of turret rotation sound. It'll kind of go zzzz, and that lets us know that the board recognizes the receiver and they can talk to each other and everything's copacetic there. So we'll turn on the radio first. I always give it a second just to be sure. Now sometimes your radio can be too close to your receiver for this. So if you have problems, which I never have, but if you do have problems, try backing up about 6 feet and see if that makes a difference. But like I said, it's never happened to me. So we'll throw the power. We got our little turret rotation. That sounds great. Now the very first thing we're going to do before we do anything else, we're going to throw dip switch 8. Okay, now what we're going to do now is we're going to calibrate these sticks. Now I always do them one at a time. You move the sticks to every corner. I make sure to move them around a couple times. I do both sides. I think you can do them both at once, but I always just do them one at a time. Now this might get a little dodgy with not having the self-centering, but we'll deal with that if we have to. Now once you've done that, you turn dip switch 8 back off. To back up for just a second, when I said I had the solid light on there, if that light had been flashing when I first started testing the servos, then I would have to bind the radio. Now everything should be set. To be sure, let's see. Alright, we got cannons on. Now here's one more feature of this radio. Let me zoom out. That I like. If you get lucky, now they're not always set like this out of the box. But if you get lucky, this switch right here fires your main gun. That's cool. That's great, especially for, this is going to be for a battle tank. So I can fire from the joystick, or I can fire from the... Now right now with all the dip switches off except for 4, we're set for a super light tank. There's my... That's the not having the self-centering. Don't blame that on the board. So now I want to try and start it. I think the manual says it's up and left, but for me, it's always been up and right. The machine gun is working. Smoke unit is working. That fires like that because I don't have self-center. I'm so used to just releasing it. No self-center. Test the gearboxes. Forward, excellent. Side to side, excellent. So that is a successful checking of my servo. Now I know where everything goes. I know on my tank, my throttle is channel number 2 on the receiver. Steering is 1. 3 and 4 were where they're supposed to be. With the 8-pin, we'll be able to test that, but I've never had one fail me yet on that. If all this stuff works, it'll work. And that's your basic bench test of the IBU base. First we tested the receiver, then we tested the board. Hopefully that'll help somebody out there at some point, and we'll see you next time.